A single dad in grease-stained clothes can't afford his daughter's birthday cake until the elegant stranger behind him quietly pays and follows them home. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The bakery window was fogged from the warmth inside, meeting the chill of the morning air, but Lily's breath added her own little patch of mist as she leaned in closer, her mittened hands flattened against the glass, eyes wide and shimmering. "That's the one," she whispered. A pink and white strawberry cake with piped rosettes and a plastic crown perched proudly on top. It wasn't the biggest in the display, but to Lily it looked like magic. Jack stood a few feet back, just inside the shop, clutching a worn envelope. He had counted the money 3 times before they left the house, once in the car, and again while Lily skipped ahead, her boots crunching in leftover snow. Now, under the fluorescent light of the bakery, he unfolded the envelope again, fingers calloused and trembling just slightly. 20s, a few crumpled 5s, coins in a Ziploc. It wasn't enough, not even close. "Can we get it, Daddy?" Lily asked, spinning to face him. Her voice was light, hopeful. She didn't know he'd made sure of that. Jack forced a smile, walking over to kneel beside her. "We'll see what we can do, birthday girl." The woman behind the counter gave him a soft look as he approached. She could tell. She rang up the cake anyway, pretending not to notice the panic flicker in Jack's eyes when she read the price aloud. He cleared his throat and slid the envelope across the counter. "I'm a little short," he murmured, shame threading his words. "Could you maybe hold it for an hour or two? I'll come back. I promise." Lily blinked up at him, confused. The cashier hesitated, then looked past him. Jack turned. A tall woman in a camel-colored coat stood behind them, perfectly still. She had striking eyes, the kind that didn't flinch. She looked at the envelope, then at Lily. "I've got it," she said simply. Jack stood frozen. "Sorry, what?" "I'll cover it," she repeated, pulling out a card. Before he could argue, the transaction was over. The cake was boxed and gently handed to Lily, whose smile returned with full force. Jack turned to thank the woman, but she was already walking away. Evelyn Hart didn't mean to stop at the bakery. Her driver had taken a wrong turn. The meeting downtown had been canceled last minute, and her phone had buzzed with the kind of messages that made her feel both too important and completely irrelevant all at once. She had told him to pull over, needing air, needing something that wasn't steel and glass and calendar alerts. The warm scent of sugar and rising dough drew her in like gravity. She didn't belong here. Not with her wool coat that probably cost more than the bakery's rent, not with her heels tapping on linoleum, echoing like questions in a quiet room. She stood in line, half present, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to notice the father and daughter at the counter, until the sound of paper crinkling caught her attention. She looked up. The man looked tired, not the kind of tired a bad night's sleep gives you, but the kind worn into the skin over years. His flannel shirt was faded, his jeans stained with something like oil or grit or life. The little girl clung to his side, bright-eyed and full of trust, staring at a cake like it was the moon. Evelyn caught the moment he realized he didn't have enough. She saw the way he paused, shoulders stiff, voice low with embarrassment. She had spent her life in rooms where millions shifted hands with a signature. But here, in this tiny bakery with pink-tiled walls and handwritten signs, it was different. It was raw, real, unstaged. The cashier hesitated, and Evelyn stepped forward. "I've got it," she said, pulling out her wallet, voice steady. The man turned, confused, grateful, defensive. "You don't have to—" "I know," she replied, tapping her card without another word. She didn't wait for thank yous or questions. She didn't want to make it awkward or turn it into some grand gesture. It wasn't about that. It just felt right. She turned before the man could finish forming a sentence. But as she stepped back out into the cold, her hand hovered over her car door handle. Something pulled at her. She didn't drive away, not yet. Jack's stomach turned as the final total blinked across the register screen. It might as well have been $1,000. He glanced down at the envelope in his hand, already lighter than it should have been. Rent was due next week. Groceries were running thin. He had scraped together every spare bill and coin he could find in the junk drawer and under the car seat. It still wasn't enough. He started, voice cracking from the pressure he tried to hide. Lily tugged at his sleeve, eyes full of expectation. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," he whispered. "We'll come back." But before he could say more, the cashier, young, gentle-eyed, like she'd seen this before, cleared her throat softly and said, "You're good to go." Jack blinked. "What?" She gave a small nod toward the door. "Someone already paid." He turned instinctively, scanning the bakery. The only person in line behind them, tall, elegant, with a face too polished for a place like this, was already gone. The bell above the door gave one last jingle, and a gust of cold air followed in her wake. Just like that, she had disappeared. Jack stood there for a beat, caught between disbelief and relief. Then the cashier was gently sliding the boxed cake across the counter. "Happy birthday," she said, eyes flicking down to Lily with a smile. Lily squealed, clutching the box like it held treasure. "See, Daddy, the cake fairy is real." Jack laughed, but it came out shaky. He bent down, brushing her curls from her face. "Looks like she is," he murmured. They stepped outside into the brittle cold, and Jack scanned the street again, half expecting to catch a glimpse of the mystery woman. Nothing. Just cars and wind and the faint scent of powdered sugar on the air. He popped the trunk of their old sedan and placed the cake carefully inside, as if it were made of glass. Lily danced on the sidewalk beside him, giddy. Jack glanced once more at the street, unsettled by the sudden kindness. No strings, no explanations, just paid, in silence. And somehow that silence said everything. Jack stepped back into the bakery's chill, thinned air, still trying to wrap his head around what had just happened. The box in his hands felt heavier than it should have, like it carried more than just cake. Maybe it was the weight of gratitude, or maybe it was the quiet ache of pride bruised by kindness. He scanned the sidewalk, hoping to catch the stranger, to offer a thank you, a handshake, something. But she was already halfway down the block, her coat fluttering behind her like the end of a ribbon in the wind. She didn't look back. She wasn't waiting for credit. Jack opened his mouth, but no words came out. It wasn't like him to be caught off guard. Usually he was the one helping, jumping cars, fixing appliances, delivering casseroles when the neighbor's kid got sick. But this was something else. He didn't know how to process being on the receiving end. Lily tugged on his jacket and pointed excitedly at the retreating figure. "Daddy, that's her! That's the cake fairy!" He looked down at her, her face lit with pure belief, as if what had happened wasn't just kindness, it was magic. And maybe, in her eyes, it was. "The cake fairy, huh?" Jack smiled, the tension in his chest loosening just a little. Lily nodded with all the certainty of a 7-year-old. "Yup. She came to make sure I got my princess cake." Jack glanced down the street one last time. The woman was gone now, swallowed up by morning traffic and cold sunlight. But the moment stuck with him. It didn't feel like charity. It felt like something more intimate, intentional. Almost like the universe had stopped for a second, reached out a hand and said, "Not today. Today he catches a break." He looked at Lily again, bouncing beside him like the birthday hadn't just been saved. It had been made. He tucked the moment into his memory, quiet and precious. Then he reached for her hand. "Come on, kiddo. Let's get this cake home before it turns into soup." Evelyn didn't mean to follow them, not at first. She had planned to drive off, maybe swing by the office, even though it was Saturday, maybe bury herself in numbers and silence. But as she stepped into her car, something about the man's eyes stuck with her. The way he'd tried to hold it together at the counter, the quiet panic behind his smile, and the little girl with those mittens and her impossible belief in cake fairies. Evelyn found herself turning the key but not pulling away. She watched as the man, Jack, she had overheard, buckled his daughter into the back seat of an aging sedan with a rusted bumper and one mismatched door. The car coughed to life, headlights dim even in daylight. Evelyn sat back, watching them drive off, and then, as if her hands moved before her thoughts did, she followed. The streets grew quieter as they left the town center, storefronts giving way to chain-link fences, corner laundromats, and mailboxes that leaned a little too far to one side. She kept her distance, careful not to get too close, telling herself this wasn't strange, just curiosity, just a glimpse. They turned down a side road that curved like a question mark. Evelyn eased back, gripping the wheel tighter. The sedan slowed in front of a small house tucked behind a patch of frost-bitten shrubs. The porch sagged slightly at one end, paint flaking from the railing. A plastic pink tricycle lay tipped on its side near the steps, its handlebar wrapped in a string of faded ribbons. Jack stepped out first, opening the back door with a kind of practiced patience. The little girl, Lily, Evelyn remembered, climbed out, holding the cake like it was crown jewels. Jack smiled at something she said, then scooped her up and carried her inside, cake and all. Evelyn parked a few houses down, engine idling, heart louder than she expected. She had no reason to be here, no reason to care, and yet she stayed. The house was small, weathered, but it pulsed with something Evelyn hadn't felt in a long time: warmth. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and motor oil, an odd but oddly comforting mix that somehow defined Jack's world. He kicked off his boots at the door, brushing the slush from his sleeves as Lily darted inside, still hugging the cake box like it might disappear if she let go. Her boots thudded against the old floorboards, and Jack smiled at the sound. There wasn't much in their little house that was new, but joy like that, it made everything shine. In the living room, paper garlands hung from thumbtacks in the ceiling, cut from old magazines and printer scraps Jack had fished out from the bottom of a drawer. The colors didn't match. Some of the letters in Happy Birthday, Lily were printed in Comic Sans, but Lily didn't care. To her, it was magic. "Can I put the crown on now?" she asked, twirling in her socks. Jack nodded, walking over to where the birthday hat, a plastic tiara from last year's Halloween bin, rested on a paper plate throne. "Of course, Princess." She grinned and placed it on her head with exaggerated elegance, then curtsied with a giggle. Jack laughed, grateful that, for this moment at least, nothing else mattered. Not the bills on the counter, not the call from the landlord, not the half-dead heater wheezing in the hallway. He made her favorite lunch: grilled cheese with the crusts cut off and apples sliced like hearts. She insisted on setting the table herself, complete with paper napkins and a plastic cup of juice. Jack let her take the lead. It was her day after all. Then, finally, came the cake. Jack opened the box slowly, placing it at the center of the table like a sacred object. The pink frosting gleamed, the crown shimmered, and Lily gasped. "You got it," she whispered. "You really got it." Jack swallowed hard. "Yeah," he said, voice low. "We did." He lit the candles with a flick of a match, then turned off the lights. Lily clapped her hands and made a wish so long and serious Jack almost asked what it was, but he didn't. He just watched her glow in the candlelight, knowing this birthday, this one right here, was the kind they'd both remember forever. The kind that almost wasn't. The last candle had melted halfway down. The frosting was smeared across Lily's cheeks, and the kitchen table was covered in crumbs and laughter. Jack leaned back in his chair, a half-finished cup of coffee in one hand, watching his daughter make her plastic tiara dance across the table like it was leading a royal parade. For a brief moment the world outside their little home faded. No bills, no rusted cars waiting at the shop, no aching worry about next week. Just this: warmth, light, and a little girl who believed in cake fairies. Then came the knock, 3 soft raps. Hesitant. Not the kind of knock from someone trying to sell something, or the kind a landlord uses when rent's late. This was different. Jack stood slowly, his body stiff from hours of crouching and lifting and carrying more than his fair share. He opened the front door. Evelyn stood on the porch, coat buttoned, hands buried deep in her pockets. The wind tugged at a loose strand of her hair, and the porch light softened the sharp angles of her face. Jack blinked. "It's you." She gave a small nod. "Sorry to show up like this." He stepped aside instinctively. "You followed us." "I did." There was no defensiveness in her voice. No excuses, just truth. She looked up at him, and for the first time he noticed something behind her composed exterior, something frayed, something lonely. "I didn't know why at first," she continued, stepping forward, boots crunching on the welcome mat. "But then I saw her, through the window, with the cake, and I realized I don't remember the last time I celebrated anything that mattered." Jack didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to people like her showing up on his porch, let alone speaking with that kind of vulnerability. But behind her stood no cameras, no assistants, no polished world of press releases and private jets. Just Evelyn. A woman standing in the cold, drawn to something she didn't fully understand. "Come in," he said after a moment, holding the door open. She stepped inside, and just like that, the birthday got even more unexpected. The warmth of the house wrapped around Evelyn like a wool blanket, a stark contrast to the evening air still clinging to her coat. She paused just past the threshold, taking in the cluttered charm of the living room, the crooked picture frames, the lopsided stack of children's books, the faint hum of a space heater working overtime in the corner. It wasn't polished, it wasn't staged, but it was real. Jack closed the door gently behind her, then rubbed the back of his neck, unsure where to begin. I didn't get a chance to say thank you. Back at the bakery." Evelyn gave a small smile. "You didn't have to." "No, I did." He cleared his throat, the words feeling too small for the weight behind them. "I didn't know what to do in that moment. We didn't have enough, and I—" He shook his head, eyes dropping for a second. "You made a little girl's birthday something she'll never forget." She didn't reply right away. Instead, her gaze wandered to the far wall where crayon-colored drawings curled at the edges, taped up proudly like gallery art. One showed a stick-figure princess holding hands with what Evelyn guessed was a very tall cake. Another had a castle made out of tires and what looked suspiciously like Jack in a crown, holding a wrench like a scepter. "She's got an imagination," Evelyn said softly. Jack followed her eyes and chuckled. "That one's her Daddy's Garage Kingdom drawing. She said I'm the king of spark plugs." Evelyn smiled, not the kind she wore in boardrooms or cocktail galas, but something smaller, something truer. "I don't usually do things like that," she admitted, shifting her weight. "Buying strangers cakes, following them home." "Yeah," Jack said, a nervous laugh escaping. "I kind of figured." She glanced at him, eyebrows raised. "That obvious?" "Let's just say you don't exactly blend in around here." Evelyn shrugged. "I wasn't trying to." Then, after a beat, she added, "I just didn't want to drive away from it." From what, she didn't say, but Jack understood anyway. Lily peeked around the corner with the stealth of a spy in pink pajamas, her plastic tiara slightly askew, and a dab of frosting still clinging to her chin. She spotted Evelyn standing near the wall, eyes on her drawings, and decided that was all the invitation she needed. "Hi again," she chirped, skipping into the room with the unfiltered confidence only a child could pull off. Evelyn turned, surprised but smiling. "Hello, Your Highness." Lily giggled. "You remembered." "I don't forget royalty." Jack from the kitchen called out, "Lily, let our guest breathe, okay?" But Lily was already mid-interrogation. "Do you have a dad?" The question hung in the air, simple and sharp. Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. "I did." "What was he like?" Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. Jack stepped into the doorway, towel in hand, about to redirect the conversation, but Evelyn raised a hand, just slightly. It was okay. "He was very smart," she said slowly, thoughtfully. Strict. Very busy. Lily tilted her head. Did he make you birthday cakes? Evelyn's smile faltered for a breath, just a flicker. Not one who made me birthday cakes, she answered, the words soft, like something she hadn't said aloud before. Lily was quiet for a moment, nodding, like she understood more than most adults gave her credit for. That's okay. My mom didn't either. She went away when I was little. Jack froze in the doorway, heart thudding, but Lily didn't flinch. She said it like a fact, not a wound. Evelyn crouched to her level. Well, your dad's pretty amazing. Lily grinned. He made the whole house look like a party, and he made grilled cheese with hearts. She leaned closer and whispered, even though he burnt the first one and threw it away before I could see. Evelyn laughed, the sound more real than she expected from herself. That sounds like love to me. Jack watched them, something warm and strange stirring in his chest. It wasn't just the cake or the decorations. It was Lily, connecting like she always did, and Evelyn, letting her. A girl who said too much, and a woman who needed to hear it. Evelyn checked her watch out of habit, not urgency. There was nowhere she needed to be, not really. The silence waiting back at her penthouse didn't exactly call to her, and the idea of returning to a space filled with minimalist furniture and maximum emptiness felt heavier than usual. Still, she hadn't planned to stay long, drop in, be polite, disappear. But Lily had different ideas. Do you want to stay for dinner? The little girl asked, already crawling up onto one of the mismatched kitchen chairs. We have grilled cheese left over. Dad made too many on purpose. Evelyn glanced at Jack, who offered a small, crooked grin. She's not wrong. I always burn the first one. Figured I might as well make enough to mess up twice. Evelyn hesitated, caught between instinct and something else, something slower and unfamiliar. It's just grilled cheese, Jack added, sensing her pause. But we've got apple slices, and Lily's convinced ketchup is a side dish. I'm a ketchup princess, Lily declared, dipping one with theatrical flair. Evelyn smiled in spite of herself. How can I say no to royalty? So she stayed. The kitchen table wobbled slightly when they sat, and the plates didn't match. There were crumbs from birthday cake still clinging to the tablecloth, if you could call a faded beach towel a tablecloth. But none of that mattered. The room felt full, lived in, real. Jack poured her a glass of juice. No wine, no sparkling water, just plain old apple, and she took it like it was a toast. Lily dominated the conversation, rattling off her ideas for a garage castle and a pony that could do oil changes. Evelyn laughed more than she had in weeks, maybe months. Not the polite kind she was used to in boardrooms or charity galas. This laughter came from somewhere deeper, somewhere that hadn't been touched in a long time. She didn't finish her sandwich, but she didn't notice. What she did notice was the sound of Jack's quiet laugh, the way Lily swung her legs beneath the table like she was keeping rhythm with the universe, and the crumbs, the beautiful human mess of it all. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing polished floors and the kind of sterile silence money tends to buy. Evelyn stepped into her penthouse, the hum of climate control the only sound to greet her. No giggles, no mismatched furniture, no burnt grilled cheese, just cold marble under her heels and the faint reflection of herself in the glass walls stretching out over the city. She slipped off her coat, letting it fall onto the sleek leather chair that nobody ever really sat in. The city lights blinked far below like a different planet, cars moving like ants, people with somewhere to go. She stood there for a long moment, unsure why the quiet felt louder than usual. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from her assistant. Monday board meeting, rescheduled to 8 o'clock. Your remarks on Q4 needed. Reminder, donors brunch Tuesday. Do you want notes prepped tonight? She stared at it. Usually she'd type back immediately, thumbs fast, responses curt, efficient. But tonight she didn't. Her phone screen dimmed, and she let it slide face down on the counter. She walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge out of habit, and found it as untouched as ever, green juices lined like soldiers, containers labeled with macros she never checked, and a bottle of white wine she couldn't remember buying. Nothing she wanted, nothing real. Closing the fridge, she leaned against the counter and let her eyes wander. Everything in the apartment was designed, every corner, every object, but there was no soul in any of it. No color-smeared drawings, no paper garlands taped to the ceiling, no smell of sugar or burnt toast. No laughter echoing off the walls. Just her. She pulled the hair tie from her ponytail and let it fall to the floor. For once, she didn't care. In a quiet burst she couldn't explain, she crossed to the bookshelf, grabbed a dusty old album from the bottom shelf, and flipped it open. Childhood photos, ones she hadn't looked at in years. A little girl in a party dress with no candles on the cake, a suit-wearing father checking his watch in every frame. She closed the album and whispered into the silence, "Not this time," and left the lights off as she went to bed. Jack stood in the garage, sleeves rolled, grease smeared across his forearms like war paint. The place smelled like engine oil and old coffee, exactly the way it always had. A '98 pickup sat on the lift, half disassembled, the kind of job that paid enough to keep the lights on, but not enough to breathe easy. He liked it that way. Predictable, manual, honest. He wiped his hands on a rag and leaned against the tool bench, eyes scanning the space like he was seeing it through someone else's eyes. Her eyes. Evelyn had noticed the cracked linoleum floors, the flickering overhead light, the fact that his office doubled as a break room and a parts closet. She hadn't said anything, but she noticed. That alone had him on edge. Jack wasn't built to be seen, not like that. He didn't ask for help. He was the guy who offered it, the guy who stayed late to fix a neighbor's brakes at cost, who showed up with jumper cables when nobody called. Pride wasn't just in his bones. It was survival. It was the reason he made grilled cheese with the last slice of cheese and cut it in half like it was plenty. So when someone like Evelyn Hart, a woman who looked like she stepped out of a glossy magazine cover, walked into his life and didn't flinch, it threw him. And when she lingered, laughed at his daughter's ketchup jokes, sat at his kitchen table like it was the only place she wanted to be, that's what really rattled him, because it felt good. Too good. And Jack knew better than to trust things that felt too good. Life had taught him that the hard way. Smiles faded. People left. Help came with strings, and generosity often ended with an invoice. He adjusted the wrench in his hand, jaw tight. She'd probably come around again, and when she did, he needed to remember who he was. The guy who didn't need saving, the man who fixed things, even when everything inside him wanted, for once, to let something be fixed for him. The wind outside howled like it had teeth, slipping through the cracked seams of the garage door and biting at Jack's knuckles as he wrestled a rusted bolt loose. His breath came out in clouds, and his fingers, stiff and red, fumbled slightly with the wrench. The space heater in the corner clicked uselessly, long dead, more sentimental than functional now, but he kept working. Because cars didn't care about weather and bills didn't wait for spring. Underneath the belly of an old Buick he heard the faint crunch of tires outside. He didn't look up right away. Most folks didn't stop by this late unless something was smoking or wouldn't start. Then the door creaked open. Jack rolled out from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag, already bracing himself. What he wasn't expecting was the figure silhouetted in the doorway. Tall, elegant, wildly out of place. Evelyn. She stepped inside cautiously, her heels clicking on the concrete, until they reached a dark oil stain. She paused, glanced down, then stepped over it without a word. "I should have called," she said, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her coat looked expensive but thin, not built for the kind of cold that lived in places like this. Jack stood surprised. "Everything okay?" She nodded, but didn't speak right away. Her eyes roamed the garage, the chipped workbench, the hanging tools, the pegboard with scribbled notes and a picture of Lily taped beside a warranty sign. She took it all in like it mattered. "It's freezing in here," she finally said. Jack offered a half smile. "Warmer than outside." She walked closer, stopping near the old space heater, looking at it like it might come back to life if she stared long enough. "This place, it's kind of amazing." He laughed under his breath. "You must have hit your head." "I mean it," she said, her voice softer now. "It's not pretty, but it's honest." Jack looked down, unsure of how to take the compliment. He wasn't used to people like her noticing places like this, not unless they were lost. But she wasn't lost. She'd come on purpose, and that warmed something in him the heater couldn't. Evelyn stood with her hands in her coat pockets, her breath rising in soft clouds as she scanned the garage with purpose now, not as a guest, but as someone imagining possibilities. Her eyes lingered on the cracked concrete floor, the battered lift, the shelf of mismatched tools that had seen better decades. She didn't see a mess. She saw a blueprint. "You could do a lot with this place," she said casually, like she was talking about the weather. Jack didn't look up from the carburetor he was cleaning. "It works fine." "I mean more than just fine," she continued. "A new lift, better lighting, insulation, for starters. That heater's practically antique." He blew out a slow breath and set the part down. "You came all the way here to tell me my heater's garbage?" Evelyn raised an eyebrow, undeterred. "No, I came because I see what you've built, and what it could be." Jack wiped his hands and turned to face her fully. "What it could be," he echoed, voice low. "I'm not saying you need help," she added quickly, "but a little investment, some upgrades, a fresh coat of paint, this shop could grow. You could hire help, take some pressure off." Jack crossed his arms, muscles tensing under the flannel. "And what do I owe you in return?" "Nothing," she said simply. He laughed once, sharp and hollow. "Right, just out of the kindness of your heart?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "Yes." Jack shook his head and walked past her toward the back workbench. "I don't do charity, Evelyn." "It's not charity," she said, her voice firmer now. "It's potential. I'm offering because I believe in what you've built. You help people, Jack. Let someone help you." He didn't respond right away. He just stared at the floor, jaw clenched. Evelyn softened. "You've kept this place alive with duct tape and grit. I'm not trying to change it. I just want to give it a fighting chance." Jack picked up a wrench and held it like armor. "I've been fighting my whole life. I don't need anyone swooping in to save me." She didn't argue. She just looked at him and said quietly, "Maybe not. But Lily deserves warmth in the winter." Then she turned and walked out, leaving the words hanging in the cold like something too honest to ignore. The morning sun crept in through the smudged kitchen window, casting streaks of gold across the table where Lily sat hunched over a piece of printer paper. Her tongue peeked from the corner of her mouth as she focused, crayons scattered around her like candy. Jack stood at the sink, elbow deep in dishwater, trying to pretend he wasn't still turning over Evelyn's words from the night before. She wanted to help. That's what she said. No strings, no catch. But people always wanted something, eventually. Still, she hadn't pushed, hadn't thrown money at him like a solution. She'd just offered, and then walked away. Jack scrubbed harder than necessary, like he could wash the doubt from his hands. Behind him, Lily hummed a little tune under her breath, the kind of melody kids make up without realizing. Then she hopped down from her chair. "Done," she announced proudly. Jack turned, drying his hands on a rag. "What did you draw this time?" She held it up with both hands, beaming. A triangle-shaped house stood in the middle of a green field. Stick figures smiled beneath a big yellow sun. One tall with spiky hair, one smaller with a crown, and another with long, dark lines for hair and a pink dress. "This is our family," she said simply. "You, me, and the cake fairy." Jack froze. "The who?" he asked, even though he already knew. Lily tapped the tallest figure. "You," then the smallest. "Me?" She pointed to the last one. "And her." He looked at the drawing again. The woman, Evelyn, was smiling too, her stick hand holding Lily's. The three of them together, like it had always been that way. Jack crouched beside her, eyes still on the picture. "Why'd you put her in there, sweetheart?" Lily shrugged like it was obvious. "Because she keeps showing up, and she makes you smile when you think I'm not looking." Jack blinked, caught completely off guard. Lily tilted her head. "You don't like her?" He hesitated. "It's not that." "Then maybe she belongs," Lily said with a nod. And Jack had no answer for that, just a lump in his throat and a crayon drawing that suddenly meant a whole lot more than paper. The office in the back of the garage was barely more than a storage closet with a coffee maker. A battered desk sat in one corner, cluttered with receipts and socket sets. A portable space heater buzzed weakly by Jack's boots, pushing out just enough warmth to make the air bearable. The chairs didn't match, and the coffee tasted more like burnt toast than beans, but Evelyn accepted the chipped mug he handed her with quiet gratitude. They sat in a silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just full, the kind that waits for something real to rise. Jack leaned back in his chair, arms crossed loosely, watching as Evelyn stared into her cup like she could read the past in the steam. Her coat was draped over the chair behind her, sleeves dangling. Without it, she looked smaller, less polished, more human. "I used to hate silence," she said after a long pause. "Thought it meant something was wrong, something missing. But lately—" She trailed off, lips twitching into something close to a smile. "Lately, it feels like the only time I can hear myself think." Jack nodded, but didn't speak. "My mom used to fill every quiet space," she went on. "Music, conversation, lists, directions. Always something. Even when she was sad, she was loud about it. She had big dreams, mostly for me." She sipped the coffee, winced slightly, but didn't complain. "When I was 13, she started calling me her retirement plan. Used to joke that I was her ticket out of debt. I laughed along, pretended it didn't mess with my head." Jack's brow furrowed, but still he said nothing. Evelyn glanced at him, almost surprised to find someone still listening. "By 25, I was CEO. By 27, I'd forgotten what a weekend felt like. And somewhere in there, I stopped asking if I was happy. I just asked if I was winning." The heater buzzed again. Jack shifted, not to speak, but to lean forward, forearms on his knees. Evelyn's voice softened. "People see the heels, the car, the job. They don't see the part of me that still wonders if I'm only worth what I produce." Jack looked at her then, really looked, and still he didn't interrupt. And somehow that silence, the kind she used to fear, felt like the safest place she'd ever been. The morning light spilled into the garage in streaks, catching on dust motes that danced in the beams like they had nowhere better to be. Jack sat at his usual corner of the workbench, sipping coffee from a mug with a chipped handle and grease fingerprints that never quite washed off. He was halfway through sorting a tray of mismatched bolts when he heard the unmistakable sound of heels on concrete. He turned, expecting a customer, or maybe Mrs. Callahan from the diner needing another jump. But it was Evelyn, not in a designer coat, not with her phone in hand or sunglasses shielding her from the world. No, this time she wore jeans, a sweatshirt, and in one hand, of all things, a bright red toolbox that looked like it had only ever seen showroom shelves. Jack blinked. "You lost?" She smirked. "I said I wanted to help." He set his coffee down slowly. "Yeah, I remember. I just didn't think you meant manually." She stepped further into the garage, eyes scanning the space with a new kind of focus. "Well, I figured you wouldn't take a check, so I brought a screwdriver." Jack leaned back in his chair, arms folded across his chest, trying to decide whether to laugh or run. "You even know what to do with that thing?" She popped the latches on the toolbox like she'd practiced. "I Googled it." He let out a low whistle. "This should be good." Evelyn smiled, not the tight practice smile she gave at charity galas, but the kind that crept up from somewhere deeper. "Look, I'm not here to fix your transmission, but I can sort parts, sweep the floor, Organize that nightmare of a tool wall you keep pretending is efficient." Jack raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. "So this is how CEOs invest now?" She shrugged. "The other way was easy. This way feels real." For a long moment Jack just stared at her. Not the money, not the connections, just her, standing in his world, toolbox in hand, offering time instead of answers. He grabbed his coffee again and took a sip, then promptly choked when she picked up a wrench the wrong way. "This is going to be a disaster," he muttered, coughing. But he was already smiling. Maplewood had never been the kind of town where secrets lasted long. Gossip moved faster than the mail truck, and it didn't need gas or reason to keep going. So when Evelyn Hart, heels, history, and all, started showing up at Jack Collins's garage with a toolbox in hand and dirt on her jeans, it didn't take long for the whispers to start. They came soft at first, like curiosity wearing a polite mask. "Who's the new friend helping Jack?" turned quickly into, "Did you see that car she drives?" And, "She doesn't look like someone who changes oil." The barber shop had theories. The diner had declarations. By Tuesday morning, someone swore she was a secret investor. By Wednesday, a rumor had it she was buying the entire block. Thursday, she was Jack's long-lost high school sweetheart, despite no one remembering her from high school. Jack heard it all. In line at the hardware store, over the counter at the gas station, even during an oil change for Mrs. Callahan, who gently offered, "Not judging, dear, just curious." He kept his answers short, kept his head down. Pride ran deep in his bones, and he didn't like people assuming Evelyn was swooping in to fix what he hadn't asked to be repaired. She wasn't some savior in designer jeans. She was something else. He just hadn't figured out what yet. Still, the murmurs reached the garage walls like wind through cracked windows. Jack tried to ignore them, but Lily didn't care. She sat cross-legged on the shop floor after school, coloring with tire chalk on cardboard while Jack worked. She didn't ask about town gossip or speculate about Evelyn's past. She just looked up with a crayon-smeared smile and said, "Dad, is my friend coming back today?" Jack paused, the wrench in his hand suddenly heavier. He glanced at the clock, then the front bay door, then down at Lily's drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands again. "She might," he said softly. And for the first time that day, the noise outside the garage didn't matter. The truck was an old Ford, the kind with dents that told stories and a paint job faded by too many summers. It groaned like a tired man when Jack lifted the hood, and the engine inside looked like it had given up somewhere in the late 90s. He was elbow-deep in it when he heard her voice. "Tell me where to start." He looked up, eyebrows raised. Evelyn stood at the edge of the garage, hair pulled back, sleeves already pushed up. She wore a coat that probably cost more than the truck's resale value, but her expression was all business. "You sure you want to ruin that nice outfit?" he asked, eyeing the crisp fabric. She shrugged. "It's already ruined. I leaned against your tool bench last time." He almost smiled. "Right. Forgot. Welcome to the Grease Club." She walked over, hands slightly hesitant, but her eyes steady. "I figured it was time I learned what all these tools actually do." Jack reached into the open engine bay, pulled out a socket wrench, and handed it to her. "This one's your new best friend." She took it, inspecting it like a foreign artifact. "Okay, what am I fixing?" He leaned in beside her, pointing. "That bolt right there. You'll loosen it while I hold the filter." "Got it," she said, kneeling without hesitation. Within minutes, she had smeared oil across her wrist and left a black handprint on the side of her coat. She didn't seem to notice or care. Her cheeks flushed from the cold and concentration, and every time she slipped or cursed under her breath, she laughed. Real laughter, not the kind that's polite or rehearsed. It echoed through the garage and wrapped around Jack like warmth. "You know," she said as she tightened the final bolt, "this might be the first time in years I've done something where the outcome wasn't already decided before I started." Jack glanced at her, caught off guard by the honesty. "Welcome to Maplewood," he said. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a woman pretending to belong. She felt like part of the fix. The sky had darkened without anyone noticing, a slow fade from gold to indigo that crept through the garage windows until the only light left was from the bare bulb swinging overhead. The truck was fixed, mostly, and the tools were scattered across the floor like breadcrumbs from a day well spent. Jack wiped his hands on a rag, the smell of oil lingering on everything, even the air. Evelyn sat on the step just outside the bay door, sipping from a mismatched mug of lukewarm coffee. Her coat was streaked with grease, and her hands, usually perfectly manicured, were marked with smudges of black. She should have looked out of place, but she didn't. Jack stepped out beside her and passed her a clean towel. "You've got a little everything on you." She glanced down and laughed. "Good. Proof I didn't just supervise." The town was quiet now. No traffic, no buzz of gossip, just the low hum of a distant street lamp and the comforting creak of the old sign above the garage. Jack leaned against the doorframe, sipping his own coffee, watching her. "You should probably get going," he said, not looking at her. "I know," she answered, but made no move to stand. They sat there for a while in that kind of silence that only happens after shared work, satisfying, weightless, the kind of quiet that holds something more. Evelyn looked up at the stars, softer now than she had been all day. "You ever notice how time moves different here?" Jack nodded. "Yeah, slower, but not in a bad way." She swirled the coffee in her mug and sighed. "Back in the city, there's always something to chase, something to fix before it breaks. Out here—" She trailed off, the words caught somewhere between thought and confession. "Out here I can breathe." Jack didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She set the mug down gently beside her. "I should leave." "You should," he said, just as gently. But she didn't, and neither of them rushed to change it. The envelope came in the usual way. Tucked between oil-stained catalogs and a utility bill he already knew he couldn't pay on time. Plain white, no return address, just his name in stiff, black type. Jack recognized it instantly, the kind of letter that didn't carry news so much as a ticking clock. He opened it in the back office, alone, with the heater wheezing and Lily's latest crayon drawing taped beside his head. His eyes skimmed the words, but he didn't need to read them twice. The message was clear. Foreclosure pending. 30 days. He stared at the letter, his fingers tightening around the edges, then folding it once, twice, until it fit into his back pocket like something too heavy to throw away and too dangerous to leave lying around. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine. Oil changes, brake pads, small talk he didn't remember having, but everything felt slower, sharper. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and every time the phone rang, he flinched like it might be the next bad news. Evelyn showed up around 4, her sleeves rolled, toolbox in hand, ready for whatever mess he had lined up. But when she walked in, she didn't see the usual easy grin. She saw something different. He was still himself, still moving, still fixing, still holding the weight of the world like it was just another job, but his shoulders hung lower, his jaw clenched tighter, and when she made a joke about spark plugs being allergic to her, he barely offered a smile. They worked side by side on a customer's SUV, silence falling more often than words. Evelyn handed him tools without asking. He didn't thank her like he usually did, just nodded. Finally, as he leaned into the engine bay, she asked softly, "Bad news?" Jack didn't answer right away, just tightened a bolt that didn't need tightening. "No worse than usual," he muttered. But she caught the flicker in his eyes, the weight in his voice, and though he tried to hide the storm in his pocket, Evelyn knew. He was sinking, quietly, proudly. And for the first time she didn't ask if he needed help. She just stayed. The garage had emptied for the day, the last customer driving off with a repaired muffler and a wave. Jack wiped his hands and checked the time. Lily should have been coloring in the office or bouncing on the old couch, but instead she was sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor, brow furrowed in deep concentration. A pile of sticky notes, dull crayons, and an open lunchbox surrounded her like evidence of something big in the works. "What are you scheming?" Jack asked, stepping over a socket wrench as he crouched beside her. Lily looked up, eyes bright. "I'm making blueprints." "For what? A spaceship made of peanut butter?" She grinned. "No, a cake shop." Jack raised an eyebrow. "A cake shop, huh?" "Yep." She pointed to a shaky crayon drawing. "Right here next to your garage. People can come fix their cars and get cake. But only if they're nice." Jack chuckled. "That's quite the business model." Lily's tone turned serious. "But it's not really for money. It's for people who don't have enough, like how the cake fairy helped me, so we'll help other kids." Jack opened his mouth, then closed it again. There wasn't a trace of childish fantasy in her voice, just pure, 7-year-old logic shaped by experience. Before he could say anything else, Evelyn's voice floated in from behind. "Did someone say cake shop?" She walked toward them, dusting her hands from helping reorganize parts in the back. Lily lit up. "We're going to build one, right next to Daddy's garage, for people who can't pay." Evelyn knelt beside her, studying the crooked floor plan with genuine curiosity. "You're on to something, Lily." Jack shot her a look. "Don't encourage her. She's had too much juice today." But Evelyn didn't laugh it off. She looked at Lily, then back at Jack. "Actually, I think it's brilliant." He blinked. "Wait, you're serious?" "Dead serious." Evelyn smiled, then tapped the spot on the drawing labeled cake counter. "Let's do it." Lily gasped. "Really?" Jack looked between them, his daughter grinning with uncontainable joy, and Evelyn, dirt on her jeans, eyes burning with something bold. Hope. Initiative. A plan. The next morning, the garage smelled like motor oil and marker ink. Jack stood in the middle of the office, staring at the whiteboard Evelyn had dragged in from the local hardware store like it was a crime scene. Half of it was filled with familiar things, part inventory, job schedules, pending invoices. The other half? Cupcakes, color-coded cake tiers, stick figures holding wrenches, and frosting bags. "Tell me you're not serious," Jack said, arms crossed, eyebrow raised. Evelyn didn't look up from her sketch. "Dead serious. This is the layout. Garage in the front, cake counter in the back, easy flow between the two. Clients can wait for their oil change with a slice of chocolate fudge or a sprinkled donut." Jack blinked. "This is Maplewood. We're barely used to seat warmers, let alone cinnamon rolls next to car lifts." "Which is why it'll work," she said, turning to him, eyes lit with excitement. "It's unexpected. It's kind, and people remember kind." Lily burst through the office door with construction paper in hand. "I made a menu!" Jack looked down. Purple scribbles listed items like Hope Muffins, Good Job Brownies, and Pay What You Can Pie. Evelyn took it without hesitation. "Perfect! We'll laminate this." Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "You two are out of your minds." Lily grinned, but in the fun way. He sighed, glancing around the garage, the peeling paint, the tired tools, the weight of too many almost late bills. Then he looked at them. His daughter, already dreaming. Evelyn, all in. "You really think this'll work?" he asked. Evelyn stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Jack, this isn't just about cake. It's about giving people a reason to stay a little longer, to feel like they're not just customers but seen, that they matter." He stared at her. This woman who used to sign deals in boardrooms was now planning frosting schedules between break jobs. And the strangest part, it felt possible. He exhaled, picked up a dry erase marker, and drew a square next to the tire rack. "What's that?" Evelyn asked. "Storage closet," he muttered. "We'll turn it into your bakery counter. But if you call me Chef Jack, I'm out." The conference call started like any other. Scripted greetings, obligatory smiles on frozen screens, and the sterile sound of status updates echoing off high-rise walls. Evelyn sat at the long glass table in her downtown office, still smelling faintly of engine grease despite having changed into a crisp blazer. Her hair was perfect, her posture impeccable, but underneath the surface, her heart was still somewhere else, somewhere warmer, somewhere real. "Evelyn," came the clipped voice of Thomas Grady, the board's senior chair, "we need to discuss your recent absences." She didn't flinch. "I've been working remotely, as allowed." He gave a dry smile. "Yes, we noticed. From Maplewood, of all places." A few heads on the screen nodded, some politely, others with concern veiled as curiosity. "You've been seen," another board member added, "in a garage, wearing jeans, baking." Evelyn arched a brow. "Helping build a side business that supports local families and expands brand reach through grassroots connection. But sure, call it baking." The silence that followed was sharp. "This isn't what we expect from a CEO at your level," Thomas said. "This detour is concerning." "Is it?" she replied calmly. "Because while I've been detouring, I've identified a sustainable micro-investment model that fosters loyalty, community equity, and actual impact, which, last I checked, we don't have a single strategy for." "You're not a nonprofit," he said flatly. "No," Evelyn said, folding her hands, "but maybe we should start acting like we care." The line buzzed. Another voice chimed in, more cautious. "Look, Evelyn, no one's saying you haven't performed, but we're worried about optics. Investors are asking questions." "And what are you telling them?" she asked. "That their CEO is distracted." Evelyn leaned back, pulse steady now. "Maybe I'm finally focused." Thomas's voice hardened. "If you keep playing small, we'll have no choice but to revisit your authority. You built this company with vision, Evelyn. Don't throw it away for cupcakes in a car shop." She didn't answer, not right away, because for the first time she realized something. They had never seen her vision, only her utility. And this time she wasn't playing small. She was building something big, with her hands, her heart, and her name off the sign. The resignation letter sat on her screen, blinking cursor poised at the end of the final sentence. No grand exit speech, no power moves, just plain language and her signature, typed with fingers that didn't shake this time. Evelyn read it once more, then closed her eyes and hit send. That was it. No one stormed the office. No alarms went off. No headlines appeared on her phone. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was freedom. She stood up slowly, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, and looked out at the city skyline she had once chased like a finish line. So many hours, so many deals, so many versions of herself tucked away in boardrooms just to survive a world that never paused for breath. She had once believed this view meant she'd made it. Now it just felt far away. Her office was still full of symbols, awards on the shelf, framed photos from investor summits, a cabinet drawer of unopened champagne bottles reserved for victories she didn't remember anymore. She reached for one of them, held it in her hands, then gently set it back. She didn't need to celebrate this way. She picked up her coat, still dusted faintly with flour from last week's cake test with Lily, and slung it over her arm. Her assistant poked his head in. "Everything okay?" Evelyn smiled, warm and honest. "Yeah, it finally is." She walked out without a speech. No press release, no last-minute meetings, no turning back. The elevator ride down felt different this time, lighter, like gravity had loosened its grip. Outside, the winter air greeted her like an old friend, cold, real, unfiltered. She got into her car, no driver, no schedule, and headed not toward a hotel or a penthouse, but toward a garage that smelled like motor oil and cinnamon. She didn't need a legacy etched in gold. She just wanted to build something that made people feel seen. And for the first time in years, Evelyn Hart wasn't anyone's CEO. She was just Evelyn. And she had never felt more powerful. The morning they hung the new sign, Jack stood on the ladder, one hand gripping the weathered wood, the other holding a drill that groaned from years of use. Evelyn was below, arms crossed, pretending not to look nervous. while Lily danced in circles near the entrance, holding a frosting-stained ribbon she'd insisted they use for the big reveal. The new sign wasn't flashy. No chrome, no neon, just clean lettering on hand-sanded oak, carved by a retired teacher Jack knew from high school who still had a gift with wood and a soft spot for underdogs. It read simply, Collins and Hart Auto, built on grit. Beneath it, nestled beside the main door, a smaller window gleamed with fresh glass and a hand-painted shingle hanging above. Lily's Cakes. Pay what you can. No fine print, no pricing board, just a chalk menu with words like kindness cupcakes, second chance cinnamon rolls, and hugs in muffin form. A bell above the tiny door jingled when pushed. Lily had tested it 27 times the night before. Jack climbed down, wiping dust from his palms. Well, that's it. Evelyn looked up at the sign, the names together side by side. It's real now. It was always real, he said, but now it's ours. She glanced at him, smiling in that quiet way she did when words couldn't hold the whole thing. People are going to talk. Let them, Jack replied, nodding toward Lily, who had already set up a folding table with 3 cookies and a paper sign that read, free samples, but only if you're nice. And they did talk. At first, people came for repairs. Then they started lingering. They'd wander over to the window, ask about the pay-what-you-can policy, and walk away with more than dessert, sometimes with a little hope, sometimes with tears. The cake counter wasn't big. It had 1 shelf, a tiny fridge, and a cash jar labeled Donations and Dreams. But it opened hearts in ways no blueprint ever could, and by noon, a line had already started to form, not for cake, but for something sweeter. The kitchen smelled like sugar and laughter. Flour dust floated through the air like soft confetti, clinging to countertops, aprons, and the tip of Lily's nose. She stood on a stool, proudly wielding a wooden spoon twice the size of her hand, stirring with the focused energy of a chef preparing for royalty. Because in her mind she was. Her 8th birthday was tomorrow, and this time the cake wasn't coming from a bakery window. It was being made, right here in the back room of Lily's Cakes, with love, frosting, and a little too much vanilla extract. "Are we sure it needs this much pink?" Evelyn asked, raising an eyebrow as Lily emptied another bottle of food coloring into the bowl. "More pink means more princess," Lily declared with absolute authority. Evelyn laughed and held out a hand to keep the mixing bowl from tipping. "All right, princess, just don't dye the walls." Jack leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with a grin that hadn't left his face all week. The place had changed, sure. The garage had a second lift now. The cake window had its own little seating nook, and people still came from towns over just to say they'd been there. But the heart of it remained exactly the same. Love, grit, sugar. And today, Evelyn wasn't just the woman who paid for a cake. She was the woman helping bake one. They'd been through a full year of stories, surprises, and quiet mornings that turned into slow dances in the kitchen. Jack hadn't asked Evelyn to stay. She just never left. "Time to add the crown," Lily said, reaching into a small box she'd kept hidden under the counter. It was the same plastic crown from that first birthday, the one she'd worn like a badge of hope. She placed it gently on top of the layered, slightly lopsided masterpiece they had built together, sprinkles scattered like confetti. Jack snapped a picture as Evelyn leaned in, arm around Lily's shoulder, frosting smudged across both their cheeks. "Perfect," Evelyn whispered. And this time the cake didn't just mark another year, it marked how far they'd come. Lily was the first one to find it, tucked between her homework folder and a half-eaten granola bar, sealed in an envelope with a glittery sticker shaped like a cupcake. She'd pulled it out at the kitchen table, eyebrows scrunched in curiosity, while Jack scrubbed a stubborn stain off the counter and Evelyn stirred something warm on the stove. "There's a letter in my bag," Lily announced, waving it like a treasure map. "And it's not my spelling test." Jack looked up. Evelyn froze, spoon mid-stir. Lily opened it without hesitation because, in this house, secrets didn't last long and mail was fair game. She read it aloud, as only a child could, each word deliberate, sacred. Would it be okay if I stayed a while longer? Silence wrapped around the room like a blanket, the kind that didn't need fixing. Lily blinked, then looked up. Is this for me? Evelyn's voice was quiet. It's for both of you. Jack stood still, hands damp with dish soap, staring at the woman who had once been a stranger on the side of a road. There was no ring, no down on one knee, just this. One sentence, scrawled in Evelyn's handwriting, placed not in a box but in a backpack filled with crayons and crumbs. Lily smiled. I vote yes. Jack dried his hands on a towel and crossed the room slowly. He didn't speak right away, just stepped beside Evelyn and took the note from Lily's hand, read it again, folded it carefully, and nodded. That was all. No speeches, no questions, no grand moment to post online. Just Jack and Evelyn, and a quiet agreement between them that whatever they were building, however unconventional, however hard-won, was real. Evelyn reached across the table and gently took Jack's hand. Lily reached out and took the other. And just like that, without rings or ceremony, they were a family. The kind formed not by tradition, but by choice. The classroom was buzzing with the familiar chaos of presentation day. Shoebox dioramas wobbling on desks, nervous kids clutching note cards, and a few brave souls already sweating through their carefully ironed shirts. Lily Collins sat in the front row, legs swinging beneath her chair, a folded piece of paper in her lap, and a sparkly plastic crown tucked in her backpack just in case she needed it. When her name was called, she walked up to the front of the room with the confidence of someone who'd already lived through bigger moments than spelling tests and math quizzes. My story's not about a pet or a vacation, she began, glancing at her teacher, who gave her a small nod. It's about cake. A few kids giggled, but Lily kept going, voice steady and bright. One time, she said, when I was turning 7, my dad took me to the bakery to pick out a birthday cake. It was pink and had a crown on it, and I wanted it so bad. But we couldn't afford it. I didn't say anything, but I saw the look on his face. The room quieted. And then, she continued smiling, a stranger behind us paid for it, just like that. She didn't wait for a thank you. She just left. Her teacher's eyes glistened. But that wasn't the end, Lily said. She followed us home. A collective what? Rippled across the classroom. She wasn't creepy, Lily clarified quickly, grinning. She was curious and kind, and she didn't just buy us cake. She stayed. She built a cake shop with us. She helped my dad fix the garage, and eventually... Lily paused, then opened her paper to read the last line she had written carefully the night before. She became our family. There wasn't a dry eye in the room, not from the kids who didn't quite understand it all, and certainly not from the teacher who had been told weeks ago that Lily's guardian might come for pickup today. And outside, Evelyn stood by the school fence, watching through the window, her heart catching on the words. She never left. The garage still opened at dawn, the coffee still brewed too strong. Jack still had grease under his nails, and his back still ached in that familiar way after lifting one too many transmissions. The winters were still cold, and the heater still clanked in protest. Some things hadn't changed, but everything else had. There was music now, Evelyn's playlists humming softly from the back office, a strange mix of classic rock and indie folk, sprinkled with whatever Lily had recently discovered on the old kitchen radio. There was the smell of vanilla drifting in from the cake counter, where a try-me-free tray sat beside a tin marked, "Pay what you can, take what you need." There were voices, real and human, not just customers but neighbors, people who stayed a little longer because the air here felt warmer. There was laughter. God, there was laughter. Lily's mostly wild and unfiltered, bouncing off the garage walls like sunlight. Evelyn's too deeper now, fuller. And Jack's, rough around the edges, but honest. The kind of laugh that came from someone who hadn't had much reason to in years. They lived in a house with a slanted porch and a kitchen table covered in coloring books and engine manuals. Dinners weren't fancy, but they were shared, sometimes with grilled cheese, sometimes with burnt lasagna, always with seconds. Jack still worked late, still balanced ledgers on the back of receipts, but now there were 3 mugs in the dish rack, 3 names on the wall calendar, and a framed drawing in the office that read, "Collins and Hart, where cars get fixed and hearts do too." They hadn't made it rich, but they'd made something better, a rhythm, a life. And when the day was done, when the tools were put away and the cake window closed, Jack would find Evelyn in the kitchen, her hair pulled back and flour on her cheek, and Lily at the table with homework she barely touched because she was too busy telling stories. And Jack, tired, greasy, full, would lean in the doorway and think, this is what home sounds like. The sign above the garage had faded some with the years, sun-bleached and weathered by seasons that came and went like old friends. But the words were still there, carved in wood and history. Collins and Hart Auto, built on grit. And just beneath it, nestled under a green awning with hand-painted daisies, the smaller sign still swung gently in the breeze. Lily's Cakes, pay what you can. Tourists pass through Maplewood more often now, drawn by stories that lived online, photos of cupcakes shaped like wrenches, headlines about a garage that healed more than just cars. They came expecting a novelty, maybe a cute backstory for social media, but what they found was something else, a heartbeat. Locals watched them come and go with quiet smiles. They knew the story, not the one polished for magazines, but the real one, the one that lived in the walls of the shop, in the aroma of cinnamon rolls on cold mornings, and in the laughter that still rang from the back room. "That's where it happened," they'd say, pointing with a fondness usually reserved for family portraits. "That's where love started, with a dad, a little girl, and the woman behind them in line." Inside, Jack still worked the front of the garage, though he moved slower these days. His hair had more gray, his hands more scars, but his smile, wider, softer, had never changed. Evelyn managed the cake counter now, in her flour-dusted apron with the same quiet focus she once reserved for boardrooms. And Lily, taller, louder, still wearing that same old plastic crown on special days, ran between the two worlds like she'd been born to live in both. Sometimes Jack would look up from under a hood and catch a glimpse of Evelyn laughing with a customer, or Lily handing a cupcake to a wide-eyed kid, and he'd feel it all over again, that moment at the bakery, the envelope he couldn't fill, the hand he never asked for but couldn't imagine life without. It wasn't about the cake. It never really was. It was about what came after.